Well, hello to you. It is the Fool on the Hill Daily Devotional. And yesterday, if you recall, we talked about three things. We said, just because something looks good does not mean it is good. Just because something feels good in your heart or in your body or in your mind doesn't mean it is good. Just because something sounds good, thirdly, does not mean it is good. So those three things, we said, these are important scriptural principles. But even after we discussed that, we said, well, then how do you know what is good? How do you know what is good? Well, here's three things, three ways I think that we can all use, tools, if you will, that we learn from the Lord that help us to know in this society that's throwing all kinds of things at us saying, this is good, try this, try this, try this. We need to know to be able to discern between good and evil. Luke 6:43, Jesus is talking and he says that a good tree brings forth good fruit and that a bad tree brings forth bad fruit or corrupt fruit. And he kind of adds that a good tree can't bring forth bad fruit and vice versa. A bad tree can't bring forth good fruit. So what's he saying? Is he saying that all of us need to go into the fruit business? Is he talking about apples and oranges? No, he's talking about what happens as a result of a particular thing that you might experience. Or let's say you're evaluating, is something good or is something bad? Is something good from God's perspective or evil? Well, what is the fruit of that particular thing? In the Noah movie, there are many things that leave you with, I guess you could say, bad fruit. There's bad fruit as a result of the movie. Again, I'm not bashing the movie. I'm saying the message that comes forth from it is bad fruit. I'll just give you one example. In the movie, there is this whole idea that Noah grabs a hold of, the Noah character in the movie, that God's real intention is to wipe mankind completely out because man is the problem. Animals are innocent. The environment has been raped and pillaged by human beings. So really God's intention is to have a man who will be used of him to save all the animals and let them start over. But he is supposed to oversee the killing, the extinction of human beings. And for a while there, at least 25 minutes of the movie, Russell Crowe, who plays Noah, becomes a homicidal maniac, willing even to kill innocent little children because he sees human beings as the problem. Ultimately, he can't do it. Spoiler alert. And he ultimately says, I can't do it. And you're left with this idea that God told him to do that, but he, because he has some almost a higher moral, on a higher moral plane even than God, decides he cannot harm another human being like that, even if God commands him to do it. And so what is the fruit of that? The fruit, if you don't know that the Bible teaches something different, that God actually saved the human race by wiping out, and we'll talk more about how that all works and how it seems to be a contradiction, but actually it makes perfect sense if you understand the context. You'll see that it's the opposite of the fruit, of the message that comes forth. One of many messages that come forth from the Noah movie. So God is not less and not less morally than we are. We are not up here and God down here. Not at all. Instead, it's completely the opposite. So the fruit test we apply. Secondly, we should apply the God-centered test. That is to say, everything that's good comes from God. In Luke 18:19, someone comes up to Jesus and says, "Hey, good teacher." And then he asks him a question. Jesus said, "Why do you call me good?" Knowing that God alone is good. And so the idea, there's a lot of things that you could talk about theologically from that particular verse, but one thing it does say is that anything that is good is of God. And anything that's of God is good. And the way you know what is good is by seeing if it's attached to God or not, if it really does come from Him. And so you can ask yourself the question, is the message that I'm getting right now from this particular movie man-centered? Does man get uplifted and exalted? Or is God uplifted and exalted? Noah is uplifted in the sense that even though he becomes a homicidal maniac, ultimately his conscience, which doesn't seem to be affected by God, decides, I cannot kill the human race. Therefore, I will just put down my axe and be done with it. And in a sense, man is elevated. And God is down here someplace. He remains this mysterious, capricious, evil God that has a bizarre sense of what is right and wrong, and man somehow has a higher and more elevated and more evolved sense of what is right and wrong. So the question is, the message that you receive from whatever, a movie or a book or anything else, is it man-centered? Does it lift up man, or does it lift up God? Thirdly, what about God's words test? In Genesis chapter 1:31, God finishes all of his works. He says it is good. Ultimately, what God says about something determines whether it's good or not. So the Bible is going to be this final arbiter of truth. It's going to tell us what is right and what's wrong. Not our hearts, not our feelings, not whether something sounds good or whether it looks good, but what does God say about it? So I'll leave you with that, and God bless you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.